Arguments are as common in our daily life as breathing air. And arguments are not necessarily about right or wrong, truth or lies. Mostly, they're driven by emotions and rarely by the merits of the question. Despite being so common, yet they usually have a bad surrounding emotion and negativeness in itself. Even if the argument is solved by one human proving to be right, it does not help to solve the initial matter. Did you ever stop to wonder why? How to end an argument on a positive note? To answer this question, I have used advices from one of the best books ever written, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnagie. Let me begin with the basic idea of consideration. People do not consider themselves to be wrong. They rarely admit it to themselves and almost never to someone else, if asked. Take Al Capone, for example, America's most notorious public enemy, the most sinister gang leader. When he was caught, these were the words he used to defend himself. I have spent the best years of my life giving people lighter pleasures, helping them to have a good time, and all I get is abuse, the existence of a hunted man? It is a nonsense, yes. Killing people and dealing drugs are not considered as a provision of lighter pleasures by any social standards. It's considered to be criminal activity, but nonetheless, can you imagine arguing with him on this topic? So what about people with whom you and I come in contact? Everyone has a good justification of their position or acts, and with that in mind, we can go to step number 2 of winning an argument. It is called avoidance. Try to avoid having an argument for the sake of argument. I mean, if something does not directly impact your interests, don't argue about it. And 99% of arguments are groundless differences in opinions about something that has nothing to do with us. So despite being right, why to prove a man he is wrong? Is it going to make him like you? Why not let him save his face? He didn't ask for your opinion, he didn't want it. Why argue with him? Always avoid the acute angle. It goes without saying that 9 times out of 10, an argument ends with each of the contestants more firmly convinced than ever that he is absolutely right. And that is because you can't literally win an argument. You can't, because if you lose it, you lose it, and if you win it, you lose it. Why? Well, suppose you triumph over the other man and shoot his argument full of holes and prove that he is wrong. Then what? You will feel fine, but what about him? You have made him feel inferior, you have hurt his pride, he will resent your triumph. And the man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. Not to mention that sometimes winning a big argument might require you to use some dirty cards. Have you ever found yourself in the middle of an argument when the next step in order to prove your rightness would require you to say to the other person that he or she is rubbish? For example, you are unable to prove to your friend that his idea sucks on a general argument about the idea itself, so you take a nasty card of using argument that he failed hugely many times ago and this is no different situation. How does it make him feel? Despite being right, will you change his mind? No, it doesn't work that way. Now, I'm not saying that you should be the one to admit what's imposed over to you, but you can be the one to be smarter, and simply putting an argument to bed by saying, I understand it differently, however that does not mean that I do not see what you mean. I believe you have a good reason of thinking this way, and partly I emphasize with your position. This or similar statement does not harm you, and more importantly, leaves less or no room for an argument to inflame. But if unable to avoid an argument which does or doesn't impact your interests, there is a way to win it overall, and by winning, I mean changing person's mind without putting him in a position of feeling hurt or inferior. So, how to do that? First of all, listen. Listen without any interruptions. If you have listened the full story, that's half of the job already taken care of. Then familiarize the statements, share the common points that you agree on, and unleash your arguments. Make sure to pick a language which by any means would not be insulted. For example, use general and personal statements. And just when you reach the finish line of proving yourself to be right, let the other man save his face. Without this final step, the whole argument is worthless. Letting one save face, how important, how vitally important that is, and how few of us ever stop to think of it. We ride rough over the feelings of others, getting our own way, finding fault, issuing threats, criticizing a child or an employee in front of others, without even considering the hurt to the other person's pride. Whereas a few minutes thought, a considerable word or two, a genuine understanding of other person's attitude would go so far toward alleviating the sting. In other words, you can let the man save his face by adding a simple finishing touches to your argument, like, being in your shoes, I would have most certainly felt the same way, and I am glad we had this argument because I share your position on this or that, and I think we both learned something from it. So all in all, always remember that people do not consider nor admit themselves being wrong, even if they are. Handling an argument is not proving a mathematical equation. It is dealing with emotional creatures with motives and experiences that you might not be even aware of. Try to avoid as much arguments as possible, especially when those arguments does not impact your interests. People like to argue because imposing your position for anyone else is considered a personal win for some apparent reason, which is actually a simple feeling of importance. And in case of unavoidable argument, or if we are right and the other person is definitely wrong, do not destroy their ego by causing someone to lose face. The legendary French aviation pioneer and author Anthony de Saint-Exupéry wrote, "I have no right to say or do anything that diminishes a man in his own eyes. What matters is not what I think of him, but what he thinks of himself. Hurting a man in his dignity is a crime."